Hi, I'm Miss Meghan from the Foothills Branch Library, and in celebration and honor of Black History Month and Black History all year round, I'm going to be reading the first chapter of The Burning, Black Wall Street and the Tulsa Race Massacre of 1921 by Tim Madigan, adapted for young people by Hilary Beard. This is a period of American history that, until recently, has been ignored by hegemonic discourse. New voices are emerging in academia and authorship to shed light on events both difficult to discuss and necessary to talk about. Without further ado, we're going to read The Burning, Chapter 1 by Tim Madigan. Like Judgment Day. For the rest of her life, and she lived a very long time thereafter, Eldoris Ector McCondici remembered the exact words of her mother. "Eldoris, wake up, we have to go," Harriet Ector called to her daughter on that beautiful spring morning of June 1st, 1921. The white people are killing the colored folks. A word here about language. There is a lot of language that is no longer appropriate. All of these quotes are recounted verbatim from the memories and testimonies of survivors of this experience. The cloudless sky outside was still pink from the dawn, but with those words, Eldoris's drowsiness was gone in a blink, rendering her fully awake and trembling by the time she tossed aside the covers. The 9-year-old girl threw a dress over her head as her mother rushed her along, with scarcely time for shoes and socks, and followed her parents and older brother as they hurried toward the front door of their small home on Iroquois Avenue. White people? Killing the colored folks? Eldoris waited to shake free from the nightmare, but she couldn't. She turned her mother's words around in her young mind, trying to fit them together in a way that would make sense, but that didn't happen either. The days before had been so peaceful, boys and girls antsy because of the end of the school year being just a few days away, but nothing else seemed amiss whatsoever. And white people? Eldoris's parents carefully sheltered her from the indignities and violence of the Jim Crow era, so she hadn't yet discovered that there were some white people whom she had reason to fear. Instead, every morning, her father had set out to clip white folks' lawns and weed their gardens, walking south through the black quarter where her family lived, the Greenwood district in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Downtown Greenwood consisted of sturdy brick drugstores, beauty parlors, newspaper offices, meat lockers, doctor's offices, restaurants, jewelry stores, upscale hotels, law offices, jazz joints, barbershops, skating rinks, and pool halls, all of them owned and run by black people. In the evenings, the heavenly aromas of barbecue ribs and collard greens wafted in the air, blending with the notes of jazz and blues. A self-sufficient community, Greenwood was a celebration of what seemed possible for black people in America less than 60 years after slavery's end. Indeed, Greenwood citizens, probably more so than black people in any other place in the nation, had created and built everything they needed in their own neighborhood, a remarkable 35-block city within a city, on the north side of the Frisco Railroad tracks. As far away as Chicago, black folks saw Greenwood as the top of the mountain, and for decades celebrated it as the Black Wall Street of America. Within this vibrant and promising community, black people could almost forget about the new brick skyscrapers, fancy cars, and big homes that belonged to the white people on the south side of the tracks. That is, until many made their daily sojourn cross town for work, as Eldoris's father did. But the moment they crossed the Frisco tracks that separated their community from downtown Tulsa, Greenwood's black residents stepped into a world where their sweat was welcome, but their humanity was not. In 1907, as its first act after Oklahoma became a state, the all-white legislature passed laws preventing black people from riding in the same streetcar or rail car as white people. Before long, Tulsa's black residents could not work in or even enter many of the buildings downtown, or shop in the new big stores, or go to the movies, or attend the huge new modern schools whose textbooks were paid for with public dollars, or purchase a home in the neighborhoods where white Tulsans lived. Jim Crow conventions even prohibited black people from using the state's public telephone booths. So though everything may have seemed peaceful on the surface, to maintain their advantage, many white Tulsans held the threat of harm over black people, as Eldoris was about to learn. On that rosy dawn of June 1st, 1921, Eldoris's innocence disintegrated with her mother's early morning words. The white people are killing the colored folks. And in the second that Eldoris poked her head out the front door, she knew it was true. She turned her head south as she stepped outside looking toward downtown Greenwood. A massive black cloud of smoke billowed there now, nearly obliterating the rising sun. As her father pulled her from the house by the hand, she heard a terrible noise from the sky and looked up to see airplanes buzzing low. The little girl had seen the flying machines only a time or two before, and they were ominous creatures even then. But now, as they roared above them, she heard the dull thuds of bullets hitting the ground around her feet like fat raindrops, and she realized that she and her family were being shot at from the air. She yanked free from her father then, racing in panic to a nearby chicken coop and pulling open the door. Several terrified adults already crowded inside stared back at her from the shadows. Chickens cackled nervously at the intrusion. Eldoris pushed her way through the grown-ups and crouched in a corner of the coop and would have stayed there forever if her father hadn't appeared at the door, pulled her back outside, and dragged her off to the north to join other black folks fleeing town. For her family was certainly not alone in their flight. A great column of black people was racing north with them along the Midland Valley Railroad tracks that ran past her house, a despondent procession of thousands that stretched as far as Eldoris could see. Parents dragged their children along after them, just as Howard Ector now dragged his daughter. The old people shuffled along as best they could. Many of them were old enough to remember slavery, but nothing from those times compared to the horror of what was happening on this morning. The planes disappeared from the sky after a few minutes, so now and then someone in the procession took a moment to ponder the growing wall of smoke to the south. Beneath that cloud, their homes and all their other earthly possessions were being incinerated. Why? The question hung over the procession like the smoke from the fires behind them. All anyone knew was that a few days before, a young white woman had accused a young black man of assault. However suspicious the police had found her accusation, it had caused white people to swallow Greenwood up with rage, as if every ounce of enmity that had been building up in the white people since the Civil War had exploded on their doorsteps. An angry white mob clamored at their heels. So Eldoris and her family and the rest of the people fled for their lives up the Midland Valley tracks toward the wooded hollows and rolling hills to the north of town, where they might finally be safe. Looking around at the others, at the horror etched on the refugees' sunken faces, at the smoke behind her, Eldoris was reminded of something she had learned about in Sunday school. This was like Judgment Day. As she stumbled north with her family, she expected to see Jesus appear on his throne at any second, come to set everything right. But she never did. Each member of Eldoris's family survived that day, but so did the horror. Her mother's chilling words in the morning, the smoke, the crowds, the planes, the death and grief and destruction her family saw when they were allowed to return home a few days later. Somehow, their little house on Iroquois had survived, but most of the other buildings for 35 square blocks, almost every business, church, hospital, school, and home in Greenwood had been reduced by the mob to ash and rubble. A few days after the burning, Eldoris walked to Detroit Avenue on the shoulder of Standpipe Hill, where so many of the black doctors and lawyers and businessmen and school teachers had their large, beautiful brick houses. Now, only an occasional wall or chimney still stood. On one surviving wall, a wisp of white curtain dangled from a window, tossing in the breeze. Eldorus somehow took that as a sign of God's love and hope. But the memories always stalked her, God's love and hope or not. The memories stalked everyone. In the decades to come, few Tulsans on either side of the tracks spoke out loud of the Great Burning, as though the catastrophe was a secret that both black and white people conspired to keep, although for different reasons. Indeed, people who moved to the city only a few years later might never have known that it happened at all. But whether it was discussed or not, no one who witnessed the events of those historic days in Tulsa could ever forget. And that is a selection from The Burning by Tim Madigan and adapted by Hilary Beard. Please check out this story and other titles honoring and celebrating Black history and Black joy as well as Black heartache, all month long and all year long, from your Glendale Public Library. Thank you.